Dave, this is great. To have you here in our presence for future generations to witness and hear your incredible journey. I have witnessed you back in the early days when I was doing some teaching at drum headquarters in St. Louis.
Wow.
And you would go and grab a room and you would shed and practice and work on Chick Corea tunes, and you were just always so dedicated to what you did. You were always so on top of the craft, and nothing that I have witnessed, knowing you all these years, has slowed down. You have maintained this incredible pace, which is tremendous. Thank you so much on behalf of the Sessions for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Where did it start? Where did this musical intensity that you have, where did that begin?
Well, I'd probably have to say with my father. Everything that he did, he always strived to, to share with me and tell me that, if you're going to do something, it's worth doing right, otherwise don't do it, That regiment kind of went into all the sports that I did as a kid, and he was actually kind of more hands-on with that because I took an interest to that earlier, than I did the drums.
Nice.
But I took up the drums. I don't know why. I really don't. Can't tell you why. Because I was always into music because, like I said, my dad played piano, my mom was singing, I was an only kid, so there was always music around the house. But for some reason, I was interested in music, always. And when I was 7, I think I wanted to try to play guitar because I was a Michael Nesmith freak. That didn't last too long. That lasted about 2 lessons, I think, and I decided that this was not for me. So that the neighbors next door in our little neighborhood, they had 3 brothers had a band in their carport, and there was a bunch of carport bands around at the time where everybody would,
how cool,
if they couldn't play, they would get out there and fake it. But these guys were actually playing. It was a family of bass player, guitar player, drummer, and the drummer was closest to my age, a little bit older. I just started hanging out, taking an interest, and started banging on boxes on my bed and grabbed some of my mom's pan lids, and that didn't go over too well. So buy him a drum kit, okay. So my dad got me this little 3-piece, and I put it in there and put on the record player and played to rock and roll tunes. And I've got pictures that are hysterical of snare drums this way and drums over there.
Were there specific bands that you enjoyed?
Well, back in those, I remember Three Dog Night. I remember Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Wow.
I remember the Monkees. I wasn't such a Beatles fan. I didn't get into that until later for some reason. When I was young, when I was that age. But it was just kind of the pop rock stuff that was happening.
Which was on AM radio. It was being played all the time.
And
so it was easy to
I would buy the
yourself.
45s.
Yeah,
and when I moved the drums to the living room, when I was 9 or 10. I would try to play with my dad, and he was a huge ragtime Dixieland piano player music fan, so he had a bunch of Pete Fountain records with Jack Sperling.
Yes, Jack Sperling was a wonderful fan.
Jack was really my first teacher.
How interesting.
Jack had a way, he had a great natural sound, with the big bass drums wide open, and he played clean so you could kind of hear what he was doing.
Yes.
It was a little... Well, it was way more advanced than rock and roll stuff, but it was within reach for a young guy to be able to go in and listen and copy and try to learn.
Yes.
And it's still, at this point, I hadn't taken any private lessons. I was in the school band, which, as far as I remember, they were, we were getting into concert band reading and that type of thing, but. And I was just playing the records, I was just playing that stuff. And then I started playing to the Pete Fountain stuff a lot and trying to learn that style of swing and Dixieland jazz. And it was kind of, Pete Fountain stuff was always a little bit upscale from just straight on Dixieland. They actually had a bass player. And it was, swinging. It was good stuff. And then, I wish my dad was around, or I wish I would have asked him the questions that it was like. Because he brought home a Buddy Rich record when I was 12, and I never asked him how or why. I don't know, like, what did you do to bring this record home? Because that was really the start of the real passion, to learn, and play and try to do that. You know, so then it was just, by the time I was 13, I had every Buddy record that I could find at that time, and as soon as new ones came out, I was getting them. You know?
And that began the research of really studying the instrument to a certain degree.
I just got into it, and it wasn't based on anybody telling me to, you know, it was based on me having the real desire to get into it and do it.
Interesting. Did you ever have a chance to talk to Jack Sperling?
I did. I did.
He was a huge fan of yours.
Well, you know, I think he knew that I mentioned him, because I've always given him credit for, you know, anytime anybody thought there was a reason to interview me when I was younger, I always said Jack was my first teacher as far as swing and Dixieland and jazz were concerned, and I loved his playing, you know. So yeah, we got to spend some moments at NAMM together, you know, before he passed. So really cool.
Jack had told me in some conversation that I had with him that you were on the list of his favorite players. So to hear that,
well, it makes sense. He hears himself.
but how clean his sound was, very clean. He had played a lot of the TV shows, the Jackie Gleason show, and a lot of those shows. He was the drummer, and it was just featured many times in those shows. Very clean player. But it's interesting that you mentioned that, because you have such an incredibly clean sound that as an early influence, then go into Buddy. So at the stage of Buddy, did you find a teacher at this point and begin to study more formally? How'd that work out?
Yeah, it was just about that time, because I was either 12 or 13 when I got a new set. My dad bought me a kit, and 4 free lessons came with that kit at the store. So that was really my first private lessons. And then there was a teacher at the store that we heard playing in the practice room one time, because I was just about done with my 4 free lessons, and we're like, wow, who's that? You know, I got to study with that guy. And that was Bob Matheny, who ended up being my teacher for a couple of years, that really was responsible for getting me into big band chart reading with the Big Bad and Beautiful Roy Burns thing.
Yes.
But Bob was really instrumental in the big band thing, the reading aspect, and he was close with Buddy, actually. So I got to experience that with him one time in Chicago when I was 14. We went to see him at the Playboy Club, of all places, in Chicago, and I got to meet Buddy that day. You know, but you know, I'm kicking myself, you know, still to this day, because I was so shy and so young, and I'm just like, I didn't say anything, you know.
Well, Buddy was 1 in 10 son of a gun. I knew Buddy, and he was an intimidating factor in just his presence, because of the greatness of what he did, and his clique of Sinatra and all of the great Rat Pack that Buddy used to hang out with. He was a real celebrity at that point, so it's easy to get intimidated by someone like that.
Well, this would have been '74, so you know, that was, you know, he was still right on the edge of his prime, and you know, he was still, obviously, I mean, he played great till the day he died. But also, sort of within that period, same time, I auditioned for the high school jazz band, and I got the gig. So I then had to really kind of get my reading, and you know, it was one of those reasons to have to practice.
So the music school program then was a pretty important part that played you to kind of push a little further.
You know, looking back, of course I had the desire to learn and study myself, but I have to say that, you know, growing up especially in St. Charles, where we moved when I was 11 or 12, and so by the time I was 13 or 14, I would have gotten into that jazz band.
Nice.
So yeah, that school program, they had a jazz program. They had a band. They had a marching band. They had a concert band. They had a jazz band.
Fantastic.
I know.
We're losing that now.
I know.
And that's, unfortunately, they're not. You know, young kids are not able to experience that level of all that diversity. The marching band, the jazz band, the concert band. All that widened your influence of what you're listening to.
I know. Yeah.
Interesting. Very, very powerful.
Yeah. So that was a big part of it. It kind of was this rolling train that started all to happen at the same time.
Yeah.
And you know, luckily, like I said, I had complete support from my parents. The drums were in the living room from the time I was 10 until,
what a blessing.
You know, I think I moved them in my room when I was into a separate bedroom when I was 15 or so. But I don't think that lasted too long. I think they came back in the living room, because the big stereo was there, and it was great. And I meant to, you know, I was going to say too that, you know, with Buddy's stuff and even Jack's stuff, I remember doing it too. The record player was this huge console. And I could slow the records down to 16 RPMs, you know, and hear all of this, you know, you know. So it could really And it was amazing how even and clean the strokes were, even, you know, detuned in half.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, not that I could actually figure anything out anyway, you know.
But
Still
you
can't.
But you, oh, I'm sure you were exposing yourself to a study that you were provoking. So I mean, this is you now going now into your own world of, I want to figure this stuff out.
Right. There's a certain study and a certain awareness that happens by using your ears and just listening without the visual. And then the visual puts the how-to to it, but I think sometimes the sonic aspect of what's going on really it can get lost if you're not focusing on it.
Right.
And I spent a great deal of time listening, you know, to the sounds and to the tunings, the air, the essence of whoever it was that I was listening to when I started to really listen to the drummer, which started with Jack.
But what's amazing is that your ability to hear sounds has always impressed me in the many events that we've done together. You always get a great sound in any room and sometimes you don't have all the equipment that you want there, you know, that's on your rider, which happens to all of us, but you still happen to maintain an incredible clean sound, balanced beautifully with the music. I mean, that's got to come from just your training, that listening aspect.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, no, really.
Recently, the last few years, really, I've been going back and watching the guys that I couldn't really see that much, you know. Trying to dig up everything of Papa Joe that I can find, trying to dig up everything of Sonny Payne or, you know, or whoever.
Yeah, yeah.
And especially Buddy. I'm going back into it hard right now just to fully understand, you know, the visual, because I attempted when I was 14, 15, 16 to emulate and to understand what he was doing, which was impossible. I saw him a half a dozen times, probably more, you know, from a distance.
Right.
Never got to sit up, you know, 10 feet from him or anything, you know. So it was really kind of a mystery, you know. And by the time I was 16 or 17, I was sort of yearning for the more contemporary thing anyway. And I was so into Buddy that I had to stop. I had to just put it away. Then Gad came along, you know. So then, you know, when you're talking about the sound, it's like what you're hearing, you know, what you hear mostly today is kind of more the contemporary sense of the tuning, the individual kit, where the microphones, all closed mic, are part of the mix of everything that goes on. Right, right. And why I brought up the whole thing of going back is because if you look at videos pre-1971 or 2, any drummer, whether it be Clyde Stubblefield with James Brown, that, mind you, was playing traditional grip with a full-headed bass drum, with a snare drum slanted like this, 4-piece kit. Everybody was coming out of the jazz thing. One mic, one kick, everybody. So you had to tune the drums to sound like one instrument.
Yes.
So there was no, you know, at that time, there was no big, you know, thick dead head on the bass drum with a hole in it, and then these open toms, you know, or even, you know, thick heads on dead toms, small drums.
Yeah.
This has kind of been a little bit of a profound realization for me, only within the last month, because, you know, this is 2017. This is Buddy's, you know, birth year anniversary.
Would have been 100.
Yeah, he would have been 100 years old, and I have been asked to do some. There's everybody that has a big band is doing Buddy Rich tribute stuff, right? So anytime that I've done the Buddy thing, I've sort of been with the state of mind of like, you know, okay, I'm gonna tune the drums a little higher, but for the most part, it's just gonna be me. I'm gonna set up my setup, I'm gonna do my thing. And this time I said, you know what? I'm gonna go back and set up like I did when I was 16, you know.
Great.
And, you know, I've got 2 or 3 kits with 24-inch bass drums, including my Yamaha Phoenix that I have now. And so I just dug them all out, and I put, you know, felt strips and coated ambassadors, full heads, 13, 16, cymbal flat.
Old school.
You know, and I put up one mic and a kick drum mic, tuned the drums up, and I listened to Buddy, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's like a D or an E, you know, so fifth between the drums. And I was like, oh my God, it's the sound. It's
That
the
is
sound, you know,
incredible.
tune a snare drum up and, you know, and just one mic overhead, big condenser right over the snare drum basically, and the kick mic. And it's like, that's how they used to do it, you know, and it's an instrument that is tuned to sound like one instrument.
Into accordance of itself. How
Yeah.
beautiful, Dave.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And I think, you know, we got away from that when everybody started to close mic.
Right.
Because when you put a microphone right next to the sound source, if it's ringy and high pitched, it's going to not sound so nice. So people started taping things up. They started taking front heads off of bass drums. I can't hear the click of the bass drum, you know, and then stuffing it with stuff.
Absolutely. Pillows and blankets.
And then the heads got thicker and the drums got smaller.
Right.
And I, you know, when I got into that contemporary side, when Steve Gadd hit us all over the head in the early to mid 70s with this sound that we had never heard really before,
Right.
in a jazz context.
Right.
It was like, what's that? Why are the drums so in your face and
Yeah.
clear and clean and punchy? And it was because the drums were dead themselves, tuned well,
Right.
but mic'd close.
Right.
And so it was then we relied on the engineers. We relied on the mix to bring it in. And as you know, if you then start watching videos in the mid to late 70s of Buddy, where now there's 5 mics and it's like,
Yeah. It changed.
some of them sound terrible.
It
you know,
changed, absolutely,
because
absolutely.
it's like, where is that sound? You know, those
Absolutely.
mid-60s records, you know, that was 2 mics, man.
And Buddy liked bringing with him it was 3/4-inch plywood that had a hinge down the center, 2 4x8 pieces, and it was an 8 foot by 8 foot piece, and it had notches in there where his stands would go. And he didn't like playing on a carpet, he liked playing on wood, so the drums would come back at him the way he wanted to hear them.
Well,
So he was very aware of that sound.
I don't know anything about what he did with carrying stuff around like
Yeah.
that, but
That was his thing, yeah.
That would make sense.
So he always had his wooden floor and his drums on setup, so he had that sound. So he had at least the most consistent sound per room he was in that he heard.
Right.
In how he played.
Right.
It was very fussy with that. Steve Peck used to be his sound and his drum guy. And I remember him setting up that floor, even if it was on another wooden floor, they put that down and they had that, so he had his sound.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I know you're conducting this interview, but you can put this in or to leave it out or whatever. But I'm really, because I'm messing around with the tuning, and I listen to, you know, his records and stuff, and I'm really curious how he tuned the floor toms. I don't really get what he did. Because there's been rumors that he tuned his bottom head really low and lugs were falling out. And I said that's impossible to get the sound he was doing if he was tuning that way.
Absolutely. It's interesting, and I had the chance to tap his drums a couple times. I always felt that the bottom head was a little tighter, the top head was a little looser.
Well, that makes sense.
That's how it was.
Yeah.
But they were still tuned a little higher
Yeah.
than normal.
Yeah.
So he had good response out of it,
Yeah.
but a lower sound and reaction. But he was the kind of guy where he could go on to a TV show and sit
I
on
know.
anyone's drum set
Without moving a thing.
touching nothing and pull a sound that was great.
Yeah.
So he had that, but he didn't like tuning the drums, but he knew when he got to his drums if it wasn't right. He knew what was uncomfortable for him.
Yeah.
So he wanted that sound. So it was amazing how, you know, listen, I was able to watch Buddy many, many times, and I see a lot of your intensity and how you take control over your sound and how you are extremely concerned with your sound, which is how Buddy was. He was concerned with his sound. He wanted his sound to be the best for his audience. And that's how you are. You want the best sound, but when someone comes to see you, you want them to hear the best that you can deliver to them.
Well,
That's huge.
absolutely. For me, of course, I can talk all day about me and my, you know, process. Like I said, I went into the kind of the whole Gadd school, if you will, with that, you know, small drum low tuning. After I studied with Freddie, when I kind of had a, you know, more awareness of things technically and musically too, I was getting tired of the smaller drums tuned low thing because acoustically they just didn't say anything.
Right,
so I
right.
dropped the 8-inch tom and I went to the kind of the standard 10, 12, you know, 14, 16. Coated ambassadors and tuned maybe a little higher, you know, than I had been doing before. But still with that same kind of principle of close miking and getting the sound happening. And I, you know, ever since the time I was 14 or 15, well, more like 16, I did dive into the recording engineer aspect because my friend Jay Oliver was into it, and he was way ahead of me, and he was teaching me. So I got some real basic training behind the desk in mixing drums and EQing and understanding what noise gates were and all that compression and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And when I got to New York and I started to then get into the scene with professional engineers, man, I spent most of my time just hanging out in the back watching what they did, you know, to understand and learn how they were mixing
Absolutely.
things, you know. So, but that sound aspect and that presentation, it's 50% of what we do,
Absolutely.
you know, if not more. You know?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, of course, we have to touch the instrument and tune it and play musically, but it's what people are hearing that can make it for them or break it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And it's so I've taken it to the nth degree and sort of taken whatever engineering chops I have, and I carry my own mixer.
Yeah.
I have presets that usually can work just about anywhere with minor tweaks, and because my microphones, my drums, and the mixer is all one setup, it doesn't change, so it's all becomes a, you know, something that's a consistent.